No matter what happened this offseason, there was always going to be a ton of interest in the LA Lakers for the 2018-19 NBA season, simply because, well, they're the Lakers. They did miss the playoffs for the 5th consecutive season last year, but did manage to win 35 games, their highest total in that 5-year streak without a postseason appearance. They were a team on the rise with some good young talent on the roster, namely Brandon Ingram, Julius Randle, Lonzo Ball, and surprising rookie standout Kyle Kuzma. But as always, they were rumored to be in the running for a handful of high-profile free agents this past summer because, well, once again, they're the Lakers. As it turned out, those rumors just happened to be true, at least those related to LeBron James potentially leaving Cleveland to sign with LA. But even with the King now on the roster, they made a handful of really interesting offseason moves. And because the Western Conference is so strong, even having as great of an offseason as they did does not guarantee them to be a top team in their own conference, much less the entire league. Let's go ahead and get started with the 2018-19 NBA season preview for the LA Lakers. So normally in these videos I go through each move the team made individually and talk about the impact they'll have on the team. But let's just be honest here, every move LA made and will make moving forward is with LeBron James in mind. So that's how I'm going to talk about them. It became clear once James signed with the team that the plan was to surround him with good players on one-year deals to make the team as competitive as possible this coming season while still maintaining 2019 cap space and flexibility, and to keep their promising young players around rather than trade them away for immediate help. This is a pretty big contrast from LeBron's return to Cleveland, for example, when they traded away Andrew Wiggins for Kevin Love, showing that James is willing to be patient and wait a year to try and build the best possible team around himself in LA, which isn't something that I expected, but will likely end up being the right move in the long run, especially if they can bring in a big name or two next summer. But for now, let's focus on this past offseason. First up is the signing of Lance Stephenson to a 1-year, $4.5 million deal. Lance was a guy that I didn't even expect to be a free agent this summer, as Indiana had him under contract on a pretty cheap team option for next season, and even for all of the headaches he could cause on occasion, he was still a productive piece for them last year. As it turned out, however, the Pacers wanted to clear some more cap space for themselves and decided instead to decline the option, paving the way for him to make his way to LA. Although there are some very real spacing concerns with Stephenson, and his three-point shooting ability will need to improve drastically to be an ideal fit alongside LeBron, I can see what the Lakers were thinking with this move. Even with James and Brandon Ingram and Lonzo Ball on the roster, it's never a bad idea to have an extra playmaker on the perimeter to bring off the bench and provide a jolt of offense, especially during a long regular season in which James will likely be coasting through as he turns 34 in December. There is always the possibility that Stephenson doesn't keep his head on straight and this move becomes a mistake either because of that or his lack of spacing. But I also wouldn't be surprised to see him be a really strong contributor next season as a playmaker. Next is the re-signing of Kentavious Caldwell-Pope to a 1-year, $12 million contract. KCP came to LA last offseason on a similar 1-year deal and had a strong first season with the Lakers. His numbers don't jump off the page from a per-game average standpoint, but in terms of his shooting numbers, he had a career season a year ago. Just as with all non-star perimeter players, that shooting ability will be one of the keys to having a continued positive two-way impact on the team. He's a solid defender as well, and should he maintain or increase his accuracy as a three-point shooter, he should establish himself as a great 3-and-D presence around James, which makes him an ideal fit for LA. You can never have too many players like KCP around ball-dominant stars like James, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them continue to try and keep him around next offseason as well if his positive contributions continue. Moving on, the Lakers also brought in JaVale McGee on a 1-year veteran minimum contract. Without a DeMarcus Cousins signing and with Brook Lopez seemingly not in the plans to re-sign, LA was definitely in the market for a 5-man. In McGee, they get a high-energy big that will run the floor, protect the rim, and finish at the basket. Although his time in Golden State makes me think that he won't be able to sustain that kind of play for long stretches. It wasn't uncommon to see McGee have a huge impact on a game for 7 or 8 minutes and then barely see the floor the rest of the way. So clearly Steve Kerr either didn't trust him to finish games or to keep up that level of energy or something, which should be a concern for Lakers fans. Obviously, getting McGee on a minimum deal means the expectations shouldn't be too high, and they do have a few other options at the 5 spot as well. But I don't see him as a starting caliber option at that position, nor do I see any other player that fits that description across the entire roster. That isn't necessarily a bad thing, as maybe the plan is to play a handful of guys at that spot for 25 to 30 minutes a game and go with much smaller lineups the rest of the time. But I would have liked to see them either go after a better option or bring back Julius Randle instead of letting him walk and sign with New Orleans. Next in the free agency signings category is LA bringing in Rajon Rondo on a 1-year $9 million deal. This one caught me off guard at the time because I just assumed that spacing around LeBron would be the main priority. And with Rondo being a below average 3-point shooter, both with the Pelicans and throughout his career, it is a bit of a strange fit for him in LA. It isn't unlike the Stephenson signing in terms of a guy that struggles to space the floor, but will at least provide a good amount of on-ball playmaking. But that was only fine when it was just one of them. I just don't see how both Rondo and Lance are going to be able to share time on the floor together without being the primary ball handler or a drastic increase in 3-point accuracy. I understand the thinking of bringing in a point guard to challenge and mentor Lonzo Ball at that position, but strictly from a spacing standpoint, this is a questionable fit for me. Last up in terms of free agency additions is the signing of Michael Beasley to a 1-year $3.5 million contract. This one came a little later in the summer, but still follows the same strategy as the rest of the signings. Beasley had a great comeback season with the Knicks last year, with really good numbers across the board, despite a lack of team success. He unfortunately wasn't able to turn that into any kind of long-term security as a free agent, but does land in a good spot in LA. The biggest key to success for him, like many players on the Laker roster next season, will be his ability to sustain the improvements in his 3-point shooting numbers he has shown each of the past 2 seasons. He's never been much of a high volume shooter from the outside in his career, so it would be nice to see that improve as well, but even if he could just be a solid threat from out there, it would do wonders for his value to the team. Ultimately, this signing is much like the rest of the perimeter players LA brought in once LeBron signed. They aren't a threat to their 2019 cap space and provide some solid playmaking and or scoring around their more established pieces. And so long as they provide good spacing, they should bring positive contributions for James's first season as a Laker. The only other thing to mention here is some of the rookies that LA brought in, and though they had good moments in Summer League, and I applaud them for bringing in guys that look like they could be real contributors in the future, neither of them will likely have much of an impact on their 2018-19 season. As we look forward to next season for LA, there are a few concerns in terms of holes they still have on the roster. First, and I'm not going to go over this too much because I mentioned it a ton in the previous section, but 3-point shooting could be an issue. A ball-dominant star like James needs plenty of spacing to be as efficient as possible, and there just aren't a ton of guys on this roster that inspire much confidence in me that they'll be as consistent as they need to be. They very well could be a top 10 team in the league next season in 3-point shooting anyway, but until that becomes a reality, it is still a concern for me. Other than that, my biggest issue is just how all of this is going to come together. With so many new faces having to blend in with a few of the incumbent young guys, it will likely take some time for LeBron to adjust to a new team and vice versa. I don't expect it to be an issue by the time the playoffs come around, as it isn't abnormal to have this much roster turnover in the NBA anymore from season to season. But things might not get off to a great start as each player is learning to play with so many new teammates. And now we get to the part where the debates in the comments section will likely start. My prediction for the LA Lakers this coming season. I still have the Warriors and Rockets as not only the top 2 teams in the conference, but also in their own tier in the West. The Warriors are still the Warriors, and although Houston did lose some pieces this offseason, I still think their core and playing style put them clearly ahead of everyone else in the West that isn't Golden State. Having said that, I do see this Lakers team as the 3rd best team in the conference behind those 2. There are a ton of improved teams in the West, and it should be an extremely competitive race. But with LeBron on the roster surrounded by a much better supporting cast than he had last season in Cleveland, I don't see anyone else that should finish ahead of them this coming season. I understand that teams like the Jazz, Thunder, and Nuggets, among other up-and-coming teams, could challenge for a top 4 seed as well, but honestly, I think LeBron's going to have a great first season with the Lakers, and that should put them over the top. Now, once they get to the postseason, that could be a different story. The young guys that they'll likely have to count on a lot once the playoffs come around haven't been in those kinds of situations as professionals yet, and you never know how they will react or perform once they get there. I do think they'll win a playoff series, but since they'll likely have to beat the Rockets or Warriors to advance any further than that, their postseason run and LeBron's final streak will likely end there. I mean, maybe if they draw Houston instead of Golden State, they could have a chance to reach the conference finals, but in the end, I still see them only advancing to the second round. And there you have it, my 2018-19 season preview for the LA Lakers. Coming up next on Friday will be the 2018 NBA Offseason Illogical Awards, so be on the lookout for that. My name is Tucker, this has been Sporting Logically. If you missed any of my previous Monday, Wednesday, Friday videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.